Welcome to a little bit more of a long form presentation and worked example of something I had shown periodically ad hoc places, but also at our last kind of virtual ACT meeting. So this originally was kind of specifically the title was for the OTNDO package. Other people call it OTNDO. You can do whatever you want. The joke is it's a bad pun on entiendo Spanish for I understand, though. The idea being that you're trying to understand what your OTN extracts actually are, following up on a kind of question that we had previously, where it's like, okay, when we get these emails and you check and you say, okay, your project has been updated, and you're like, neat, cool. And then you go and you're like, how am I supposed to know what or how has been updated? So I'm going to give a similar I guess, caveat that we've given otherwise, where this isn't necessarily supposed to be analysis. This isn't really, these aren't really tools for you to go in and create something that's publish worthy. It's supposed to be able to, for you to go in, see what's different, see what's going on, so that you can kind of create those questions and do analysis, probably be a different group or pipeline. So, and I'll kind of refer you a little bit to the, if anybody wants to look at the code, of the different packages or use them, there's my little GitHub handle, and it's kind of all on there. So the main packages I'll talk about today are called the OTNDO package, which is a high-level summary of the OTN extract files for the ACT network specifically. It definitely works. I think it should also work for other OTN nodes, but I don't have necessarily the data to check with that, which I'll kind of touch on a little bit later. The Matos package, which is an API, which is application programming interface. So if I were a robot or a computer and I went, hey, Kim, 0011011011, and you're talking binary, you don't actually know what it is. The API is supposed to start distilling that further down the lane of getting to the point where I say, hey, this is what I need, to the computer, and the computer says, cool, that's what's going back. Our VDAT, which is specifically another API to interact with the VDOT executable file that underlies the Fathom Connect software. This is something that you kind of use to quickly get your detections or your temperature data or your tilt data out in a programmatic fashion without necessarily going through the different GUI interfaces that are offered. And I was going to touch a little bit on Telemetar, but I think I'm not going to. I was going to answer a separate question, and that was the fun Reptar sighting, but I'm not going to do that because kind of our VDAT is pretty well established, not established. It's really well tested. It's hard tested. I'm actually pretty confident in that. OTNDO and Matos are kind of in the teenage years where they think they're pretty good, but they need you to go and prove them wrong. They need life to teach them some hard lessons. So I would love for any of all of you to go in and tell me what is incorrect so I can make these things adults. The Telemetar package, again, not going to talk about too much. Doesn't even have its own website yet because it's a pretty baby package, but that is eventually going to automate some common telemetry workflows. So I now, works for OTN proper. We'll go and just bring up my code. I am an R person, and I'm sorry to others who are not R people. Pretty much everything that I'm going to show is based off of R, just because that's my background. It's what I think in, it's what I talk in. I think, frankly, it's kind of the common language in most of the analysis in our kind of scientific community anyway. So I don't think it's too far to go past there. So what I'm going to do is start first with the outcome rather than trying to walk through and have everyone try to think about where I'm going with stuff. I'm going to show you where I'm going, and then we're going to walk backwards through some of the nuts and bolts so you can kind of maybe understand where that's going to. So if you're like me and you have 14 different projects that you're managing with a lot of different data sets, we go through OTN and ACT to do their matches. You get what I believe are a bunch of automated emails from Kim. I don't think that you're sitting there writing me an email every time. Yeah. So you get 14 emails and your boss comes up and says, cool, Kim just sent me 14 emails. What does that mean? Do you know what this is? And I say, not really. So this was built as a way to communicate both to myself and to Dave Secor, who is here, who's a guy with a lot of great questions, and communicate what are the difference here and what are happening. And it's also a little bit to try to get a bridge back to connecting a little bit more of that network that we might have and seeing where you're coming from. So if I run through and connect it through, John, I think just put in the chat that these work with just OTN files. Julie, if you want to give me some act extract thing, I can make sure and test that it works with act as well. And it just kind of spits out an HTML file that you can open in your browser, giving you an overall idea and a summary of what's going on. So it starts off, this is a receiver data push summary, gives you, this is one of the old projects, wind energy projects we had. It says, okay, data from March 2024, data push. I know that it happened in February, but we see those in March. So that's kind of, we're leaning a little bit more on what people are seeing when I get the emails from Kim. It tells when those files were uploaded and when the previous data push was. So overall, about 77,000 detections of 875 or 873 individuals have been matched through here. So this is just trying to get that up front so we can put that into documents with our funders. It's one of our pretty like overall, that's kind of also often one of the first statements we have in our paragraphs is just through this array, blah, 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 was detected. There it is, it's up front. The specific project was 44 projects across 39 investigators. Here's what it is. Ben Gehagen basically detected all of our striped, or we detected a lot of Ben Gehagen striped bass is what this is. And kind of gives you a broader summary. You can click on the names. You can see down in the corner that this would set me up to email Ben straight away, say, hey, thanks, or, you know, I know these are striped, well, it says striped bass there. We might not always know what the species are. Sometimes be like, hey, would you mind letting me know what the species were or anything like that? And we'll use these for reporting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can kind of go down. We detected our own black sea bass. We detected dusky sharks. We detected this and that, and we can kind of list just based off of the project there, an overall summary. This goes on for 44 different projects that we had each one. So this is getting, I think, a little bit more of, well, I'll get to your question a little bit later. This is just a course thing. So inside the OTN network, they kind of have the OTN database, they kind of have a bound of what I believe, I'm not sure if the geographic bounds, maybe you can answer this for me now, are what the theoretical places, or if this is, if these are detected animals, these are the bounds of where they've been detected. What creates these?
So once we create the project metadata,
yeah.
So like in that you've given us a location, and then I don't know exactly how you do it. I kind of roughly make one based on that, and then when we actually get deployment or tag information, if they fall outside it, we can adjust them. So they're based on the area that we know you are actually looking at.
Great. So anybody who is online who might not hear that, sorry, I'll repeat that after you're done.
So in Matos, when you create a project page, there's just a general huge overview map that basically covers our entire region. And that's just what we had. That was just the way it was coded back when it was built. So when I'm then loading your project metadata, one of the checks is, does, you know, do these releases or deployments fit inside those bounds? Well, of course they do, because it's huge. So usually what I've been doing is to correct them, make them more of an actual project bound, is making your number wrong, sending it through, correcting your number, and then correcting the bound. So it actually is like a real place now, rather than I work on the East Coast. Great.
Yeah.
So yes and no.
Yeah. This is also nice because it gives, again, a pretty high level thing. Where are the fish that we've heard, or seals that we've heard in our array, kind of focus on? What are the general area? We go down, we kind of get what is like a project specific abacus plot, where it's like, okay, these are the different projects we've heard. When are we kind of hearing these? Again, this is not meant to be any type of analysis, but you can look at this and be like, oh man, okay, wait, I know that Ben tagged a bunch of striped bass. We're also looking at striped bass. These are the pulses through this array. You know, it would be a really good project. Let me reach out to him and say, hey, can we work together on this? This is something that we're seeing. I know you're going through here. This is really valuable to us. So just get a time distribution of where these projects are going through. This is probably the biggest thing for me. And if I were living in a perfect world, I think each project page would have this figure on it every single place. So you would know when receivers were in the water for each individual project and the time. So you can look here, and this is a little bit more speaking to you as an investigator. I know, for instance, in our first deployment here for this site, we just never got it back. So there's a hole there. Great, we go through there. These 4 sites were deployed later, and we had, thank God the project's over, because we had excellent recovery rate after that and got everything back. But knowing when these are out, I think is really, really important for any type of inference that we're having here. So this is kind of going back to your own summary saying, what do we have coverage? In a perfect world, I would mush this once if everyone would play nicely together, we could mush this and have it on the splash project page. We can be like, oh, this person's project, what do they have? What are the distribution of the receivers in time? We'll scroll down. You get overall summary of the number of detections and individuals per season. You'll get kind of just a course view of where those detections happened with very R spatial speak for the number of detections, number of individuals in here. And this now goes into, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, your question from earlier today, where you're saying, okay, we get this, and or should we be confident, or how do we know what's new? Do I need to look at other information? When you go down, it will tell you what is new since a certain date. It'll default to when the last data push happened, but you can also change your inputs and say, I want it to be this certain date. What's changed after that? So I know this is an old project. Actually, this ended in 2018, but it's actually kind of new. And this is the great thing about this network, is that it kind of keeps on giving as more people adopt. Well, Jake, I guess, had put up some detections from his North Atlantic Lasma rank study sometime between November 2023 and March 2024. And this is something that's new since that last data push. So I know that this array had picked up 516 detections of 20 individuals. If there were more differences, more different projects added, this would kind of flesh out a little bit further. And a little rectangle. There you go from that. And then it kind of goes down, and we'll give you again the overall distribution of what receivers heard which detections and what individuals. And then it kind of gives a really super high level things of what was not matched and whether those could probably be false, or whether it's something that maybe you need to start chasing down on your own end if you want. Really, the only thing is here is if you only get one. Usually, it's not always the case. These aren't saying this is a false detection. It's probably a false detection if you only heard once, and it gives you the whole list of all of those. We had it gives you a summary. I had about 17,000 unmatched detections across 360 transmitters. 27 of those seem false as they only have one. Leaves probably about 330 that maybe could find a home elsewhere if things get fleshed out. Not always the case, sometimes we only have two. Again, this wasn't meant to be super specific, just to give a general idea. And then it gives you, I think this is probably more useful in my opinion, looking at what might be real unmatched detections versus fake unmatched detection, just looking at the distribution through time. So looking at this one site, I know that this site was just out by itself. This looks like a pulse of transmitters through here. So I can be like, okay, let me drill down a little bit and see if those are like tags that might have been, and do all the kind of processing that we do on our hand. Oh, are these in a string? Okay, if they're in a string, then they might be somebody who tagged a bunch or go through there. So kind of going that way. And that's the end for the receiver data push summary that I have now here. This is extensible. This is adjusted. I'm working to make it more extensible from there. So if there's anything where you're like, oh, this could also be interesting to see, or this doesn't make sense, this can be pretty quickly adjusted on my end, and I'm working to make it so that it can be adjustable on your end as well. Switching to looking at your tags. It's more or less the same formula, right? It gives you an overall idea of when this was updated. I had 186,000 detections of 38 fish matched across these networks, 50 projects, 44 investigators, gives you the same thing. So Bill heard all my striped bass, basically, or Amanda did in the Hudson River. There were a lot of Hudson River fish tagged here, right? So you can go down, get a bunch of detections, click on a name, give Ian a good old email and say, hey, thanks, or hey, let's collaborate. Now we're kind of getting into some geographic extent here. And this is one place where it's nice and be like, well, I really don't, these were striped bass tagged for this project, by the way. I really don't think that they decided to vacation in extreme northern Canada. So, okay, cool. That's something that I can probably filter out there. Again, the general kind of advocate spot. These projects are also arranged by their mean latitude. This is a very East Coast migratory fish centric way to arrange things. But you can kind of see the outcome of that in my striped bass, where where it's something in Stony Brook, I guess. They were hanging around Stony Brook, but they like this north-south migration thing. Cool. Oh, okay, maybe I can ask a question about that or contact these investigators, see what's going on there. I need to change this because a lot of projects herd these fish to the point that it's listing all the projects and not giving me what we want our advocates plot to kind of look like in terms of color-coded distribution of the different tags that we have. But we can kind of, again, zoom in. This project did not hear my striped bass. That is not a correct detection. But we can kind of start zooming in at what heard where. And so this is kind of neat because it's starting to really give an idea of what this array, what the community array looked like between 2016 and well, these tags, some of them are still pinging. So 2024, 2018, 2024. So cool. That's Amanda's receiver. She heard 6 of my fish, that many detections. Let me give her an email. That's kind of what this is based off of. This is really just meant to be a very coarse assessment of transmitter loss, so kind of systemic transmitter loss. This is just looking at the number of days kind of passed versus the number of tags heard. So you can kind of see tagging events, and these are probably, you know, shed tags, mortality events, something like that. And then now our tags are pretty much dying off. So you kind of drop down there. So it can give you an idea of how many tags are still left in the system. And then we go back and say, well, what's new? Oh, something happened. I guess Amanda put in a whole bunch of receivers. Oh, cool. So now I have 20,000 or 19,000 more detections in my striped bass that I didn't have before, 14 fish. Oh, that's great. Cool. Reach out to Amanda. These are Hudson River fish with striped bass. We tag some of these off the coast of Massachusetts. We're usually trying to get natal origin. Well, this is something we didn't know before, that this group of 6 fish are probably Hudson River fish. That's important to us. We can go back, talk to Amanda and say, whoa, we just got a whole, I know that we just got all these things matched. What's going on? Let's talk. And then kind of has the same summary through that. So that's the end game of this one package. Are there questions around that before we kind of step through some other things and kind of get more into workflows on how you could programmatically interact with the ACT? So this is actually programmatically interacting with the ACT network. We'll move into programmatically interacting with the Matos database tool. So before we go there, are there any questions, comments, concerns on this thing?
Okay.
Matt.
So there was one figure of deployed for projects. I guess it was project by date that we said we'd like to see on the sort of win the project.
Yes.
But that's fine. It's just sort of win that project. See it in the water, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
This is the way this is created is leveraging your metadata that you put in and treating that as a table, and then taking all of your detection data and treating that as a table and using a non-equijoin to cross between and see which detections are falling where. No, that's something, that's a different analysis. Talk about later. Sorry, I got confused. This is literally just mapping out your deployed and picked up and just kind of giving, it's like an analogous Gantt chart. So
this is like for your, like, so this is the only see it is for your project. All right. So this is.
Sean's making all kinds of comments behind you, and they're popping out now.
This is individual receivers in your project.
yes, these are, so this is very project specific, your project specific. So this is not something, I couldn't get that from my tag returns. You don't actually know when other people's receivers were or were not in the water, which is why I was like, in a perfect world, this would be up somewhere, but we have permissions issues where some people don't necessarily want that to be shared, and et cetera. But I think this is really, really powerful to even look and say, okay, like, oh, I didn't get any detections from receiver IS to 800 in June 17. Well, it's not because your fish weren't there. They might have been, they might not have been. There just wasn't a receiver there at that point. And I think that's really important for inference's sake, kind of going through there, figuring out whether your non-detections were real non-detections or whether they were just systemic non-detections. You were never going to detect them anyway.
Yes, when I was kind of, as you were talking about that, I was trying to think about whether it makes sense that, you know, we could create an output like this, that's just a project, that's not really telling you necessarily individual receivers, but back in time, when the different projects come online, as well, could be something.
Sure, be basically be collapsing this, and so I'm not sure if any, probably people can't hear coming through my microphone. Matt was saying, oh, we probably couldn't do something receiver by receiver, but we probably could do something project by project. I guess the idea being taking this and collapsing it into one line, right? Where you would get a line from November 2016 to December 2018. So you know that if your tags stopped getting detected in January 2019, that's a systemic stop. It's not a ecological stop.
I mean, I love the idea of doing it by receiver for individual projects as well, you know, for like public projects or something like that. But yeah, trying to think of something we can do now that's project, you know, based on project dates for the whole network. Might be a useful thing.
Hey Beth, are you logged in?
Yeah.
I was gonna say maybe it'd be worthwhile to unmute you, but now I probably have interference. Never mind. So I just reiterate for people online, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, said, yeah, this would be a super neat thing to do. We just got to think about what that would be and what form it would take. Is that more or less what you're saying, on a project by project basis rather than receiver basis? Awesome. Joy.
Love this. I love it. I had a question specifically actually about this graph that's up there, because this is something we get asked a lot about. And I'm curious, in this format, could this get larger, or is it balanced with a square? Because I'm thinking like, this is 2 years, but if we have 10 years and we have 100, different stations, will it make it squish, or does it automatically size up so you can still read, and if it's, you can still see it?
The font sizes will remain the same. The aspect ratio of this figure will change according to, so if it's long and skinny, it'll be long and skinny. If it's tall and wide, it'll be tall and wide.
So like one of my thoughts is this would be maybe like a good application for like a Shiny app. Like where you could select the time frame, getting back to what you're saying, Roy, about the time frame. Because I'm having some of my researchers work with that. They're doing their individual project, probably you can see all the stuff from the network, right? Because getting in and seeing when the receivers are deployed and where is really important. And so this would be one of those projects and seem like multiple networks working together to accomplish it.
So I thought about trying to do something like that. I think the sticking point that we get to is permissions and where and when that data will be held.
That's one that we share all our receiver location deployments with everybody. Whereas I think that's where it would be.
Yeah. So if we make a Shiny app, the choices would be to, for people who might not have heard him online, he said, oh, this might be something that's nice for like some sort of other portal to kind of interact with and look at what that is coming out of. Is that what you're saying?
Basically.
Yeah. So I think that the hurdle that we have to get to, and that's a network, like people network conversation, is the process of that would be, okay, well, you have your files and you upload them somewhere. Are you now comfortable with that server having your files? What would the permission sharing be there? Or I could build it so it would leverage the Matos package and go through the website API, but then something has your username and password, which scares me a little bit because I'm not actually a security expert by any means. So I could really screw somebody over accidentally. So I think that would be, it would be interesting to kind of interact in that way. Or like if Matos hosted it, but Matos is already kind of always limited by server space and what that processing power would take. I think it's a really good idea though to move in that direction. Okay. Mike is a magician. Great point. I said, we made these charts on the website, receiver by receiver. They're hard to turn into knowledge from individual receiver histories, but the raw data is there for OTN receivers. Joy asked, how do we create the detection bounds? Kim had responded, they fit the data you are loading in, whether it's receivers, deployments, or tag deployments. Yeah, it's basically, it's the bounds of what your data inherently is. Oh, okay, they're talking about it. John said a Shiny app doesn't create interoperability. It's far not fair, which drops the I in that acronym, which I don't know what it is. Thank you, interoperability. Yeah. Why they're rectangular and different size? Joy had asked online, which kind of goes to what I was trying to, different Joy, sorry. Oh, yeah, Joy. Joy asked a different Joy. There are two Joys, there's somebody online. They're rectangular and different size because they're just dynamically changing to the size of your data. So in this instance, if I had 100 receivers and 2 months of data, it's going to be really tall and skinny. It's just going to change the aspect ratio just in the background. It uses ggplot2, so it just kind of dynamically will scale that. Then John says, making the components that enable others to make that app ensures, I have a smiley face I can't get out of the way, that we are putting metadata out there that everyone can reuse. Cool. I don't know how to comment on that. This is... the red lines are the tending dates. So for instance, this IS1 was tended in April somewhere.
See my name in there, so you must be.
Yeah, he says he has your phone number. Yeah. So these you can kind of see our tending events is we tended, 2 here for whatever reason. We had a whole scale tending trip here, and this is when everything was pulled out. So that's what the red lines are, is just when you have in your metadata and you say we pulled a receiver up at this time, that's a red line. And then the black line just starts when you say I put it back in the water. Cool. So that's the payoff. And then we'll work backwards. Now we're going into our code. Is everyone prepared? Are your loins girded? All right. How much more time do I have? Oh, good bit, I think, actually. So I'll start off in a receiver or a network agnostic type of way. So this is something that actually probably won't work for GLaTOS unless there's some manipulation of data, though it could be there. It should be more or less a slot in for fact, depending. You raise your hand. Sure.
It's in the lights.
Tell me when. Can you read that? All right. I'm starting to get confused. So there's really just, whoops. What is going on here? Screwed something up. Okay. There's really just the workhorse functions that we had in OTNDO are make receiver push summary, and it makes your receiver push summary. And there's make tag push summary, and it makes your tag push summary. The inputs to those functions are what changes. So if we're thinking of a network agnostic type of way, we have our files already ready to go. I don't know if I can zoom in. These are our files. So these are when you go through and you download from Axe, I imagine possibly from Fact, it might be similar. You're going to get your qualified detections. Our network name is prepended to that the year after, and you have all these listed, and then you have your metadata. And you can supply, let's undo everything. Don't worry about the man behind the curtain. These are literally just listing the different types of files so I can cheat. So these are the CSVs that are in that folder. That are the qualified detections, or the unqualified detections, or the deployment detections. You can hard code those right in. You can do anything. You just need to tell the computer where to look to find those files. Then You run it and you hang out for a little bit and it goes through and mushes all of those different things together, except here, those didn't match. Don't worry about it. It worked in the back end. I showed you the outcome. The issue here and what you see there actually is this is a very dumb process. It's a really, really dumb process. It doesn't think too hard. It believes that your metadata nailed it when you put it in, and it's sitting there in a perfect and beautiful form. This is not a great assumption because we don't nail it. We're human. It's not really a good assumption because I think when Kim does fix things, I don't think those fixed files go back in.
Not all the time, so especially like if you've loaded metadata and it's been processed, and then a month later, you're like, oh, hey, I made a mistake. Sometimes those corrections don't come back, so now what I'm trying to do is, and I promised this for June and well, but is basically, OTN gave me code where I can essentially extract a picture of that as a CSV for all of your receiving metadata. So my goal is to sort of do that at least on some sort of regular basis, so that you have exactly what's in the database, which is, you know, what we're assuming is correct.
So if you try to use this on your files and it fails, most of the time it's because your metadata is not correct. So we'll have a fun game. Let's play spot the incorrect metadata. I'll make it easy. Spot the incorrect metadata in column C. This would fail because these cells are somehow still stored as Excel dates. They are not stored as character strings. So when importing this, you would not get a correct date time that tells you it's January 6, 2023. You would get something that tells you the number is 41,793.760. And this would fail. So if you were going through this, if there's something you want to pick up and want to adopt, really try to think critically and look at your metadata. If it fails, you probably need to go back and change some of this. And it is no guarantee that because you were able to get, because Kim worked so thanklessly and hard in the background, and you got data out of this, that means that your metadata is good to go. It could still be incorrect. Like this ridiculous Microsoft Excel problem that I did not know existed until 10 o'clock this morning when I was running through. I didn't even know this was possible, but here we are. So you can provide these files. Yeah, Joy. In-person Joy.
So those, that's really cool, they're pulling out, putting it in that format. I'm just curious if there's, so like that example you just gave about the numbers being different. I'm wondering if it is easier for us to pull something like from the warnings table, it would be in this format, but we could export it as a CSV. So is there somewhere in the R code where you actually designate what each column means?
So I don't understand the first bit, but Joy is asking, what I will answer is there something in the R code where I designate what each column is? No, I could under the hood. It would still fail because it wouldn't match that, or it would get confused. Right now it does, this leverages the read Excel package, which figures out what those are. So it actually does know that all the other things are dates, except for that one. It says, no, this failed to parse, which then breaks the whole thing. So I could do QA/QC checks in the background, which would be worthwhile, but then it would probably still fail and it would need to kind of go in and do other statements. So I can put that as a personal issue to go in and force types.
I'm wondering like if, you know, there's more like, so all this in the database is in a big table called warnings. And if you wrote the code to extract that, like what you're doing, you're updating it for each project, these column headings would be different, but it would be what is actually currently in the database, but these column headings would be a little different, and you might get a little more information. Right.
But even the user doesn't have access to that. What we have access to are the detection extracts and the data we put in. So anything that is in the database, we don't have access to. So.
Tim's doing it where you're actually creating, right?
Trying to.
Oh, okay, and then basically when you do a push, the idea is you're gonna put this in there so they get it.
Yeah. It's just a lot.
What? No.
So there are other arguments that you can provide. If you go to the website, it's the standard pretty R documentation page that can kind of help you through. This is how one might run down to mom and dad and say the extracts are here, the extracts are here. And your mom would say, Mike, I'd really appreciate you giving me a call before a visit next time, but I'm happy you're here.
I'm rewriting my emails.
This will give you an example, and I could go over here, basically how to just use R code to batch through those, because it's just a really fun time. There are other arguments you can do. So you provide where your qualified detections are. So here's my qualified detections, just to prove that that's what's going on. There they are. You provide your unqualified detections, just prove that's what's going on. There they are. You provide whether you want to update the push deployment log. Don't worry about that for now. And then your deployment. Those are really the three things that you need, is the qualified, unqualified deployment, and then where you want to do it. We did have some requests for people who wanted to change that since date. It defaults to since the previous push. Some people are like, I actually want to know what's new since 3 years ago. I actually haven't looked and missed a couple of detections. So that's what's important to me. Okay, cool. So you can put in a new date. There are some issues with government computers. This is based off of, for anybody who cares, Quarto, which is kind of a newer language-ish that's taking over from R Markdown. R Markdown has kind of been baked into our tools for a very long time. In government computers, where you have to get permission to download things, chances are the ability to process things with R Markdown is already there. The ability to process things with Quarto is not. So if you were specifically someone who is working on a government computer, that flag is for you. So you can do, it's true, and it should build for you just using a different technology. Won't be as pretty, but it can be built. There you go. So that's that section.
Can I ask you an
You
online
can.
question?
Yeah.
Online Joy. We'd like
Online
to know
Joy.
how long you spent developing.
I'm glad Dave's gone. No. No. It's hard to answer that question, right? Because it's continuous. There's the amount of time there is to get it stood up, and then the amount of time to go back and forth. I think to get this stood up, a couple of days to weeks, just because a lot of this is based off of workflows that I already had in the background. So this is behind the scenes when I got those emails, what I would do. I would download the files. I would run my random QA/QC things. I would run and say, what's new? I would run. So all that code was already there. This was just to kind of put it into a pretty format that I could hand my boss. Because if I gave him some literate programming worksheet, he would just delete the email. It's like, cool, I trust you. Or actually try to get some investiture. Being able to read through that was pretty useful. Yeah, just want to prove that the documentation is up there. Same thing for the tag push. You just need to give your match detections. I actually don't think yeah, never mind. So I didn't do the tag decoding yet. That'll be something else. If you have thoughts, please give me an email. If you feel that you want to venture into the world of GitHub, please open an issue. It helps me track that, and that's where all of this development will occur. So from there, it's so big, it's throwing me off a little bit. It's actually a little bit easier for people who are not Joy in the room, since we are all members of this handy dandy Act Matos network. And we've kind of hacked the API to interact with the website. So to give you a fun, hopefully quick and not too overwhelming lesson of what happens on the internet.
I don't think you're allowed to talk about that.
I don't think the online people have to appreciate
The jazz hands.
jazz, I guess.
When you click,
No. I
when,
checked.
when you click a button. So the initial bit of your URL is HTTP now S, stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Yes. And then secured is the S. That's newish. This is the language that your interpreter, which is your browser, and a server use to talk to each other and send information back and forth. So that prepended bit is saying, we're going to agree to talk this way. Yep, we're going to agree to talk this way. And that's now done by a couple different rules. And so we can go back and follow that chain of rules and interaction now that we know that they're interacting in a certain way. So we'll show you. This is a log. It's pinging the website. It wants to see I'm still here. Cool. Don't worry about that. This is going to log all the traffic between this website and the server right now. Cool. It did that. What happened in the background? All of this, a lot of JavaScript was downloaded. But the important bit, if we go all the way back, is this said, hey, get, I'm trying to zoom in a little bit. Sorry, Chris, it's tough for me to zoom in here, so you just have to trust me. It says the word get this project. So it says physically go get this. In R, in Python, and anything, we can recreate that and say, hey, go get this. And this is what the Matos package does. So to try to hopefully demystify this Matos R package, all this is doing is interacting with the website behind the scenes. We talked a lot about geo servers, and we just kind of like thrown the word out and moved on. It's this mystic thing that will cure your asthma, as I've said for a couple of things, right? Just will solve all stuff. The reason that that's something to move through is that we don't have to go through this protocol and this handshake and doing, you kind of do, but the information is there. You don't have to crawl through the website, let it give you all of this unneeded, essentially pretty junk, which is nice when you're looking at this. All I care about is that text. So if I can go into R and say, hey, I want to, using the library, the Matos library, I want to list projects. We'll do that. What this does in the background is exactly what I just showed you. It clicked on a website and it went there and it gave us this information right here. So if we switch over to what that website was, if I hover over, it's really tiny, the small little bit there. That's the URL it's going to forward to you. I'll forward it to. This is the project name, and then the collection code and all this other, and the number. So we get that from the URL. All of this other stuff is actually through the OTNDO server, because all of that other metadata, the project code, the abstracts, the status of that, everything that you do put into Matos when you set your project up, and once those things cross over, are stored in the OTNDO server, and you can query that using a URL in a very snappy way and get all of this information. Sorry, actually, that was really fast because actually it caches in the background. But if it wasn't cached and I actually hit the server, which I just did, it'll create the same thing. It'll give you a little bit of a warning. So this is informative in the sense of we can look at this and say, oh, actually, all of these projects aren't on the OTNDO server right now. So it's very likely that all of these projects are the ones that are going to give Kim heartburn in the next couple of weeks, because this means these are all new. Yeah. These are the other one. These are things that are listed on OTN's GeoServer and says these should be members of ACT that we can't find a match to. So this is what happens when you change something largely about usually your project title or anything like that, and the project codes currently aren't matched up. So this is something on the OTN, or that legacy stuff where something's changed, that the OTN says this is still an ACT project, but ACT says this is not our project anymore. So these are just warnings and saying there's something here that is mismatched. You get those warnings through there. That's all well and good. We can do that if we want to do, some analysis about, like Beth's doing, how many projects use offshore wind. We have all the abstracts here, so you can just use like regular expressions or something and search there. Have fun. There's something you can do there. But that's not necessarily as important, and this is what gives me heartburn, and Beth said, some things. You can also list your project. Sorry, this, or Kim, sorry about that. It's like, you can list your project. What this does is when you click on a project which is not yours, you get a nice splash page. It just sends you right there. When you log in and you click on a project that is yours, it forwards you through some sort of protocol. So you see, it took a little bit longer for this page to load than before. It's because it's routing you through something that validates you and forwards you onto a different page. So what this is going to do in the background is see if it's going to forward you on. If it does, it stops and logs that. And then that's how you can list all of your projects. Again, this is cached, so it doesn't take that long. If I remove the cache, it's going to take a little bit. I have to sign in. There we go. It is all password protected, don't worry. So now this is going to take a little bit. So now it's going each individual project and clicking on it and seeing if it forwards. And if it forwards, like, yep, that's my project. If not, no, it's 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 not. This is also something that switching to something like a geo server would solve, is we can kind of ping that rather than having to ping the server 1.5 million times. And now we get all of these things. So now we can list what my projects actually are. What's that? This is cached, so it actually won't run. It'll just give me an idea what's going on. And now you have your projects. So these are the projects that I have access to. Cool. There's my collection codes, my numbers, the URL, all the different things that you can do, your title, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can interrupt me.
So,
Kim is interrupting me for those online.
so that gave you the actual project that you're associated with. It didn't give you all the extra fluffy ones that when you go to like do it on the website, that it looks like you have access to.
Yes, so I could cheat and go to submit data and click this, but you've noticed this is a much larger list of data of projects. So I can submit projects, data to projects, and never see that data again, or because I have no actual permissions to do that. So that's one way, which is fast. So there is something going on in the background. The database can list these. In order to get the ones that I actually can interact with, I have to have the computer go in and click each link individually and tell me if I have access to it. So it takes a little bit longer. So this is something that, as we build in something in the database, it's become snappier and snappier. Clears mode? Good.
So I follow.
Great. We got one person who follows. So since I am an Active person, in order to make things a little bit easier, Matos wraps the OTNDO package. So I can just, hey, actually, I want a nice report about my Tailwinds project. And this will go through the backgrounds, find all of your files, download them to your computer, and create that document for you. So if you are an Act Matos member and your metadata is good, and you are a limited R coder, you can just download this package, download R, know what your project code is, and give it your project code. And all of this will run in the background. So it will find all of your files. It will download all of your files. It'll mush all of your files together. And it'll ping the geo server to get all the data. And it will write that report for you in the background. Done.
Yeah, I should use this to download files that are new.
I'll get there. Yeah, we're working backwards. We're starting from a little bit kind of more payoff, more complicated, and we're doing details as we go through. So when you were getting to the point where I'm seeing this a little bit with some of my state agency peers, where the time payoff for creating new projects and sussing out all the metadata for new projects versus putting everything into one Uber project is an actually easy decision for them to make. They're saying, nope, I already set up the project. I already set up this. I'm going to put everything into this one mega project. I want to advocate and say now there are tools out there. I want to try to make them easier to use. Separating your things into nice bite-sized projects that are self-similar and doing that, I think, are easier at the end of the day for you to manage once you get things set up. And there are tools to now start making this similar. So I'm just going to throw Maryland DNR under the bus. They put all of their detections into one Uber project. This would kind of mean nothing to them, right? There's like, okay, well, I don't know which fish these were. I don't know which receivers these were. What's going on here? Where this is something. Actually, I haven't looked at this before, so this is pretty fun. Yeah, so this is a different receiver coverage thing. So this actually shows you that we failed recovering 2 receivers this past time we were out. Not great, but now it's like, oh, that's a reminder. If I don't have detections here, that's what's going on. Just gives you a summary there, right? There is a chat thing. Oh, earmuffs, yeah. So how else do we continue working with the Matos database programmatically? Well, we can, I try to, and if these don't make sense, this is all beta, right? This is meant to be you to take it, you to break it, and you say, Mike, you screwed up. That's where the stage we're at now. And this is a good thing. The more emails I get saying this doesn't work, that don't mean that aren't because your metadata was bad, the better it is. So we want to list extract files for this project. Oh, cool. Those are my extract files. What we did in the background was, where are we? I went to my Tailwinds project. Ooh, not Nantucket. I clicked on the extraction files and listed it here. So by one line of code, that's all the same data you get out of all that. That's the URL you need to download that. So I actually want to get this extract file, and I can just kind of copy in the URL there. Whoop. Sorry, just switching to its URL. And I'll download that file to my computer. So this becomes nice because now, you know, if we move on to something where we want to list our project files, this was a kind of a longerish project, and I have 133 files here. Maybe, which has happened before, I've changed computers, and oh, and this is the VFL file, infamous thing we're talking about. I changed computers, and actually all this data was on a different computer. Like crap. I'm working with another agency, and it's so much easier for them to like, I just put all this stuff in Matos. Like now I got to try to zip it and send it to you. Don't worry about it, because I can just tell the trained monkey of a computer to loop over files. We'll do the URL just to make it easier. Sorry. There are easier ways to do this. I'm sorry, I'm getting Ari on you. But the idea is that in the background, we can just have it batch all those files and just have it download my 133 files in the background. This also works for any of the other files that are on this database. So it's just a way, anything that you can do with the website, you can do with this package and go through and click things. And it just becomes more and more powerful the more and more projects or files that you have. I'm going to stop this because it's just going to keep going. There we go. Any loose questions about that? So the main workhorse things here are list projects, which lists all the projects. This is just, sorry, it's actually a little bit confusing for me. That's so big, but it's telling you all the information there. There's list my projects, which list all the projects you have access to. Once you know what your code is, there's list extract files, which will get everything that you get from OTN. There's list project files, which lists all the files that you've uploaded. And then there's a family of get functions, get extract files, get extract updates, things like that. That allows you to download all those files via script. So programming can be intimidating. Programming can be tough. It might be easier just to go and click. Programming can save you time if someone just hands you a script. That's what this is kind of designed to do in that workflow. Is that too much? Is that too little? Way over everyone's head? I actually see people looking at me. That's a good thing.
Sorry, yeah. You're using like tailings for the project name
Yep.
as the common denominator there. That pulling from standardized naming convention of all these files, or like tailings predecessor to the metadata?
Tailwinds. It's what it's doing is it's in the background. It's actually taking that data that you get from list projects, list my project, whatever, mushing that all together, which houses that project code. And so it's using that project code to filter down and build the URLs in the background to get that through. What's that? So, yeah, so if you go into all these projects have those associated codes, which again emphasizes the criticality of the
Yes.
codes that Kim had emphasized before. So you can kind of search through your code. If you mess up, which I always do, it'll kind of give you a hint and say, actually, I couldn't find that code. Did you mean any one of these projects? You can give it the full name. I don't think I have access to this, so it might yell at me. Yeah, I don't have access to this. Yeah, so it's that's not right. But I could go into something I do have access to. Be like, oh, actually, that's what I kind of wanted. And it'll list things for it. So if you typo or miss it or forget what your project is, if you can get close enough, it'll often give you a hint. Be like, ah, maybe this is what you want. Beth, you had raised your hand as well. I might have a silly answer. I don't know, Kim, if I convince you to learn off.
You did, because I'm thinking I can get you to add a, like, as far as the downloading, if I can get you to add a like after set date, I could download all of the stuff that's new in one shot from a specific project, and I don't need to download it by hand. Basically, you could have access to everything. Right, yeah.
So we can do, you can script it, right? And say, okay, well, if I list these files, I can see that here are the new files I want to focus on. So we'll just do, okay, we'll put this as our proj files, right? Proj files. We can subset this by upload date. You know, if you're a dplyr person, which most people are, you can say, okay, here's our proj files. You're gonna filter by we want, what's the column name? Upload date. Date greater than 2024-01-01. Well, those are our files. Great. We can just go in and then kind of take those URLs and just continue that thing to download just those files.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is that kind of what you'd look for? So basically what I would then do is pipe this into a for loop or something like that, that would just take each URL and download that file, download that file, download that file, download that file. Which is also when, if you kind of saw like that since argument for all that, that's also was going on behind the scenes there. Is it's just picking out the ones that are updated since that date and pulling those.
Yeah, so Kim, you're sort of picking like a little custom package for an admin user, little tiny stuff on the back.
Yeah, basically, so instead of me having to download in 3 clicks each file, each URL, when someone, sends me more than 50, I can do this. And then put in the file on my computer.
Would you have to go into each kind of individual project to pull that, or when you do that?
I have to, so,
Because it might work just with this package as it stands right now, depending, because you have to log into your accounts and you retain all of your permissions, so you would have access to all the projects to be able to do that.
so and I mean, in theory, if it. You could run it like by project. Or if even,
Sorry, I'm responding to a question online here, so you keep going.
yeah, if you, I mean, I could do it by project, or I can even do it, you know, just after a set date, like. I know I haven't downloaded anything in the last 4 weeks. So I can just pick, you know, whatever it was 4 weeks ago and then download where it would, you know, I have the rights to everything. So it would just give me all of the files after May 5th.
100%.
And then you probably.
Welcome to the club, Kim.
I don't like it.
Gonna check system, right, because you be downloading so many files,
Right.
after getting the data, push, we want to ensure that. You know, if it crashed or something, you could verify it against like a list. Project class, which we can also do.
Yeah, so I'm hoping, I know that it can be really overwhelming, especially if you're not into this or just not in the realm of coding. I really do want to advertise in that the support systems that are out there, because I think all of us recognize that this is tough. The further you get into it, there is. OTN has an excellent support system. They have these study halls they can go through. You can shoot any one of the people that you have talking here an email, or me specifically, and I'm more than happy to help through. The only thing that I hit a wall where I can't help anymore is if your metadata is malformed, because I can't get in there. I don't have permissions. I can't do anything. But if you have great metadata, we're rolling. I'll help you out all day. Yeah.
And you can just email me and say, hey, can I have the most up-to-date metadata file? And say, yeah, I can give it to you fairly quickly. Especially if I know it's something you want. That's more efficient than me doing this, you know, trying to keep up with everybody. I mean, there's 150 projects, not all of those are receiver projects, but. You know, if you want something, it's easier to ask me for it than waiting for me to get it for you.
So generally now what I do, my workflow is when I get the 50 emails from Kim, I'll do list my projects. Oops, sorry. Then I will just, what's the name here? My projects. What I really need to get out of that are the collection code, more or less, if that's changed. Anyway, so I take that. What I need is the collection code. Cool. And I'm just going to put that into what is a loop, just. And then I will get 14 reports out of this one line of code, technically 2 lines of code. Same with the receiver thing. So there's a lot of overhead, there's a little bit of learning. We're really, really happy to help you learn this. I really would argue that the payoff on the back end is worth a little bit of investiture on the front end, especially if you get to the point where you're like me and you're managing more than 2, 3, 4 projects. I can punch this in. I just shoot the whole zip file of all these reports to my boss and say, here you go, here's what's different. Cool. Anything, we'll move on to now. There's no more questions. Oh, there is a question, so we won't move on now. We will move on afterwards to playing with VDAT, but yeah.
Kind of a 3 questions. We just wanted to confirm, it looks like you did it as a demonstration. So if you were less scrupulous and you put in a project title that was not yours, it does error you out. It says.
Yeah, so what I should have done that. I'm going to reset my session here. The first thing that every function here does is check your credentials. So I have my credentials stored. If I didn't have my credentials, so I need to change computers, but this is actually just going to ping. I just have them stored here. If I didn't have them stored, which I don't know how to make it not do right now, a little dialog box will come up. I'm not sure if anybody's played with it while you're sitting here. You're shaking your head, yes. Yeah, so it pops up and says, what's your username? You put your username in, it pops up, says, what's your password? Put your password in, and then you're logged in. And that will exist for however long a standard session in Matos might be. So it might kick you off eventually and something will stop working. And if you just hit login again, you can re-log in. And because of that, because of the permissions baked into the database, you won't have access to anything you don't have permissions for. So like I said, with troubleshooting, like I can't go in to help you change your metadata. I can't fudge it or do anything. That was done very specifically when I started building this out because I didn't want, we worked really, really, I mean, I know you guys did too, because you felt really, really, really hard to work out what those permissions are. I mean, even to the point where you can see this little doodad. By using this, you were implicitly agreeing to our agreement. This is not enforceable. I'm not a lawyer. I can't do anything. But it's a nice little reminder to be like, hey, by like going through here, please remember where you're coming from. If you are looking at other people's detections and receivers, like be conscientious, use your but for rule as you're going through, like think about what's going on here and visit the data version policy 1.2, which is at the 1.1 URL. Yeah. But
Second question I have is, I saw that it, like for your receiver summary, it's pulling from the OTNDO server. I was curious, what was the benefit of that, and saying like pulling those tag codes from the actual extracts themselves?
so what's going on in the geo server is actually it's a shortcut to get the project metadata left, didn't I? The project description. There we go. Stuff. So it's to get all of this, which is stored and provided freely on the OTNDO server without doing what I just did and clicking and waiting.
Receiver summary, you're listing what's point of contact, PI, project code. Okay, I guess you don't, I'm just curious, I was looking at that and I was like, well, a lot of that's in your extract.
Yes.
Except for the project.
Yeah.
You just have it like.
Yeah. So the project name isn't there. The project code is there, though it's under different names. The emails I do believe are there. I think the project code is there, but it's not in a freely accessible way on the Matos website. You have to go in to there because all of our URLs are tied to the old number, so they're sequentially added. So it's actually pretty hard to just interface with the website using your project code because Matos doesn't actually recognize a project code. Act might, OTN might, Matos does not recognize project code. So I have to go into the OTN geo server to pull that back in. Sorry, that's a relatively technical question that like 4 people knew that.
The ugly project code.
Yep.
That's, I mean, that's the URL is the public project.
Mhm.
151 or.
My last question, I think, both of you, would this work, like, if they're practicing, not just do it, but could this work practicing phone?
I think it has probably a different structure,
Yeah,
so that might be a bit different.
but theoretically, the idea.
Is I've never been on Plone. Is Plone JavaScripty based or texty based?
That's all fun, but we're using Research Workspace right now, and we're gonna move.
Right.
So I'm gonna try out.
Because I think Research Workspace is JavaScripty based, and that's really hard to hack in.
There have to be different drivers for different files and Python text.
Okay, text is good. JavaScript is bad. JavaScript is nice because it's really pretty and does a lot of stuff and it's dynamic, but it's tough because it's dynamic and it's hard to actually create an API for. So if it is texty based, it can be done. Not by copying this code. It would have to be kind of hacked. There's a Plone API already, says John. So you're ready to go. So it might be even easier than all this. So this is a bespoke API. All right. Now for some really fun down in the dirty. Let's restart. So there are 3 people in this room, one of which is sitting all the way in the back there. And knows the new Fathom software, specifically Fathom Connect, comes with an executable file. So those who might be intimidated by this don't actually want to interact with that. Usually myself included. Sorry, it's taking a long time to spin up, but this is kind of what it would look like. Sorry, self. Yeah. Oops, sorry. Maybe I'll just do it the other way. Sorry, switching between things here. Well, ignore this. Oh, I'm not in the right place. Sorry. That's why, because I don't actually have it. So if you go through and I will hunt down where this all is downloaded on my computer. I think it's program file, there's this. Where are we? No. Maybe it's regular program files. Point is that this is, here's Fathom where it's downloaded. It has all this stuff. And then you have a little guy somewhere. Might not be in here. No, it's the drivers. Where are you? This thing. This is gold. I'm telling you right now, this is awesome. This is something that, going from Vue, I think for a while, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that this type of executable underlying it was available for a very long time. I think it was eventually shared with GLaToS so that Chris Holbrook could write something around there. This at this point is now kind of more or less freely given to us. So now hopefully I can get this thing to go. Yep, cool. Anyway. So you can see even me, I'm having an issue. Well, I'll just go straight to my R code because that actually works. So as you can see, I'm not experienced with that, and that confuses a lot. That confuses me a lot. But we can now interface through that with our VDAT and talk to it. So if you're someone who works in the command line a lot and you're actually able to do what I was trying to do and failed miserably, this is more or less what would be spit out. So this is the not friendly thing that underlines your friendly geographic user interface when you go through and click on stuff. So what does that mean? It means that we can interact directly with our files in a quick programmatic way. So if I'm using Matos and I am lists my project files for tailwinds. Let's do tailwinds. Logging in, we'll check that. Okay, cool. Here are my files. I want to pull out, I'll just check out this first detection file. So I'll wrap this. Sorry, guys. I'll try to make it fast so it won't hurt too bad. All I'm doing now is just taking this one URL. I'll just do it that way because it's easier to read for everybody out here. I'm just going to download this file. Cool. So now I have VR2W file. Oh, why is it a VR2W? I want a VR2AR file. Okay, I'm not going to do that because that's not nearly as fun because we don't have temperature and depth data and stuff. So let's change this. I'm hoping that me failing a bunch is not making you more intimidated and maybe making it more accessible. We're like, oh, this guy's supposed to know what he's doing. He's screwing up all the time. Maybe it's all right. So there we go. So we have this file that's downloaded, which is a VRL. So for a while we had the VRLs and kind of to get the CSVs or anything, we had to kind of pipe it back through Vue or do whatever you want. If we maybe just want to get it a CSV. Be careful though, I'm going to warn you, this is actually going to be pretty intimidating on the way out because it is a new-ish file format. We'll go ahead and there you go. Yeah, I now have a CSV in the background. However, it is of a form. That's large, great. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. We're not really used to, but this is what's happening in the background is that all of our data, if anybody's tried to download or use your temperature data, your tilt data, your detection data. You have to go in through view and kind of parse all that out. Can be a pain in the butt and take a long time, especially if you have a lot of receivers. In the background, that's kind of pushed into the kind of this VDAT CSV format. If anybody's used any of the, I think 180 kilohertz receivers, this is kind of, or VDAT files in general, this is what gets out of there, parse it back. It's difficult to understand, but that's fine because they were super nice and said, hey, you can actually convert this to a folder of files and split all of those. So now we have this nice folder of files that has now split our attitude, because we all love receivers with attitude. Let's just tell battery, and a couple of configuration bits, your depth data, your detection data, other diagnostics, events, temperature, right? So let's read our nail temperature data in this. Sorry, I'm gonna have to figure out. Don't make fun of me for my horrible file structure. Cool. Skip a line, I think. Yeah. So now we have our temperature data. Huzzah! Temperature data from our VR2AR. If you weren't fumbling around, you can move through that pretty quickly. You can batch through a bunch of different files that you have by creating a loop and just saying, hey, do this over and over, pull out the temperature data. We have it here. You want to get your detection data. What is that file called? Det. This is admittedly no frills. It's supposed to be kind of no frills. It's really in hopes that other people would want to, after they access stuff, be able to interact with the way they want to. This is actually non-time corrected data, but you see that you kind of get it to some random floating point time. I would not put too much stock in this. Sometimes R invents numbers when it comes to time, but especially when they're floating point numbers. So don't think too hard into it, but you get all that different diagnostic data. I think that this will actually become more and more powerful as we do switch to Nextrack. I think a lot of these fields will be filled out, but you can kind of get this data on the back end. Going back up, and we want to make this thing, we can also tell it to time correct. And there we go. Now we have a folder of time corrected receivers, time corrected data and detections. Again, anybody who's had a somewhat large array and wanted to get temperature off of it, going through view or other channels can be a really big pain in the butt to go in and try to get those, and then it winds up being a really big file. This is something that allows you to kind of go directly in. I have a much better work through on a couple different examples on the website here, including how to download everything. Due to the permissions, which are not unfair, it's pretty common. I can't ship the executable with the package. So you have to go in and download and sign the user license agreement in order to get it yourself. But after that, you can start kind of going through. So this gives you just an overview of what's going on. Kind of, you have to tell it where it is. If it's not located in a standard place, it can tell you what your what version is. Again, changing it, converting to a CSV like we did, converting it to a folder as we did. You can check out file metadata, which is kind of actually fun. What is that command? Inspect. Oh. So this gives you the programming of the receiver just at a high level. This is sometimes nice for me when I which apparently won't be an issue anymore, but when I had a bunch of receivers in the water with mixed maps because there was updates here and not updates there, I had a quick thing to be like, okay, what was the coding of the receiver at this time? Then you need to change it, which is pretty good. The template, so this will give you a quick view of what is, and these are, again, this is not anything that I've done. I've just tried to make simple commands in R that allow you to interact with the executable, to kind of interact with things in a one-stop shop. This gives you all of the different fields that are in there. And there's the help documentation that you can get there. On my website here, try to walk through some different examples and different things that you can do. Checking the metadata, like I just said, converting that file to a CSV, converting it to a folder using time correction. Interacting and extracting environmental data, specifically using Matos here. So again, if you're part of the ACT Matos network, you can kind of work in a one-stop shop. List your files, download your files, convert all your files, read your files into R, start working, plotting out your temperature stuff, interacting with your detection files right there. So this kind of gives an outline of all those different things and how to work with them, plot them out. Yeah, I can kind of, should have done that to begin with. I messed something up. Oh, didn't actually see it. Sorry. Here we go. Zooming in screwed me up a little bit. It's having trouble loading. There it is. So you can interact with your temperature data relatively quickly in a batched way. Obviously, I recovered it there and kept it on a shelf for a little bit, but yeah. So is there anything that anyone would like to see regarding this, or any questions about what's out there? Again, I refer to the website because it has a much better outline and kind of much more concrete examples than you might see here. Gives you some information about the data structure, and has this website's kind of neat. As we transition into different file types, these have stolen the example files that are in the GLaTOS package right now, and it parsed them out to give you an idea of what the different columns and data types might be for different receivers. And this is kind of dynamically updated as we go from here. So this is kind of programmatically built that all these different files, the attitude file will have 7 columns and will be that. And battery will have this, et cetera, et cetera. Now I'm wearing people down. It's good. Any thoughts, comments, concerns on that, or anything of that line?
I'll just add that, so when you guys upload your VRLs, or if you're using TX that are plugging for your data, the data is literally just sitting in the database, waiting to go somewhere someday. And I think we have, I know backup plans that they like to do with it, but getting the VRLs, all of that sitting in the back end of the database. hasn't gone anywhere.
And then lastly, something that makes all of this initially exciting. That's why I front loaded with the neat stuff and kind of dwindled toward the back. And I figured if I started and gave you the background and everyone would be asleep by the neat things. So one thing that's it makes this and other kind of development possible is having things to run it against. You kind of already heard me reference like, hey, Joy, if you can give me example fact files, we can make this work. Is a little bit of a plea, I guess, or a note in the background. This is something as a repository that John Pye at OTN actually originally made for Bruce, who is developing a package for interoperability and converting between different data types. In that, I've noticed from my own development that we just didn't have a good example set of data types. And we're at a weird point in telemetry in general where I think the bulk of it is 25, 30-ish years old. So we're at an interesting point where we're starting to forget what it was. We're starting to forget the processes we had. That it used to be like, no, it's all new. I knew what I did 5 years ago. I knew what I did 10 years ago. But we're starting to forget what's there. So being able to catalog what was there, what is here now, what different data types are, what things look like when you offload it with particular software, what they looked like when you did offload it with particular software. I think I've given somebody the same example 4 times now where I was able to dig up a VR2 file from 2006. That was a binary file at that point, and then it was imported into a view database and exported as a VRL, but because of the implicit coding changes there, you can't use it with one software. I was bailed out because Chris Holbrook was like, oh, well, this is what happened at that time. This is a VR2 PC file, and that's why that doesn't work. And I'm like, this is really important to start cataloging this. So this is what we call Project Latitudes, calling it the Library of Aquatic Tracking and Telemetry Data Samples, a nice forced acronym that we all love in science. It's really nice when you can just mix cases, right? The goal of which is to start logging some of this, have data samples, hopefully small data samples that were created in different ways, have different type of data in there from hopefully as far back as we can go and kind of move forward to start cataloging this, have a bit of a history of science and know where we are, as well as allowing people who are in the community who are interested in developing around this and processing this, provide extensibility that I think that through a lot of the presentations that Joy has given, through what Bruce is about to do, through I said, through Angela, I think we all really want the things we make to be adopted. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that they fit for as many different file types as possible, or know the lines of where it just doesn't fit. So if any of you are going through and you're going through a bunch of old data or new data and you're like, hey, this is something I'm mentioning this, please email me. If you're GitHubby, open an issue. We already kind of have a bunch that we can kind of go through. There's files that are out there that are associated already with packages. There are files that are put in kind of Zenodo and Dryad repositories that have licenses associated with them. The idea is to start ingesting these whilst giving extensive credit to each one of those people through citation CFF files and directions there. Let's see. To give you a quick example, here is actually the jerk file that I was talking about that gave issues. If anyone is curious what a VR2 file in 2004 looked like, here's what it is. This is what your data looked like in 2004 when you downloaded it. I did not know this. This is well before my time, but I think it's good to start thinking about what that looks like. And we're able to kind of also start building out extensive metadata according to what type of transmitters were in there, what type of sensors were in there. So if somebody's curious about what a temperature sensor looked like in 2004, the dream is that hopefully they can ping into this library and be like, oh, that's what that data looked like. This is what that data looked like. Here's where that is. This does allow extensive citation, which I think giving credit to anybody who would like to participate this is very important. This data has kind of already been published. Say, hey, if you want to cite this, if you want to use this data that's up here, here's what you do. And that's kind of where we're heading with this. So this is very much in its initial stages, but just want to kind of get it out there for people to think and chew on. Old files are great. New files are great as well. You can see that we're pretty bare bones and just kind of building out the framework of what that would look like at this point. But it's what makes development possible. Yeah, John says, give us your weirdo old files. Edge cases are always grand. All right. All right.
Since you played around more like with VDOT, with actually using it. And I'm just trying to think, but I actually think it's a really interesting idea of this. Reporting like CRC files, like how they were downloaded to the content. Is there anything that actually is contained in the URL when it's downloaded to ship that says what program it was downloaded with? From your receiver, like this was downloaded with CRC, this was downloaded with
view, 1.2.3, this is a downloaded view.
I don't know, do you have any insight on that by chance? So we have a container, so maybe, do you know if this information would change if it were with a different version of Vue or anything like that?
It might be an instance. We run into everything weird, like happen. But like the files that were downloaded with one version of Vue, but then looked at another version of Vue, it actually changed the ID code by one number. So it would be so but anyway, but the idea is that we keep this information going forward, it might be able to tell which software actually originally did this here.
Yeah, I mean. Yes. I concur. Yeah. Right now it's kind of, what we're trying to do is a little bit in the file tree here, but it's not in the associated metadata, which I think it should be. So for instance, this is VR2 PC version 1.0, tracking versions, but I'm not sure if there are any other versions of VR2 PC, but tracking versions, the idea would be, if you have a Vue version, whatever, this is kind of what this file would look like if it were downloaded on that, or this was created in that train. Comparison is an interesting thing. Maybe thinking about taking the same file through different versions and what that file would look like. That's something we haven't considered, which would be, I think, just as important to keep a train of what an individual file might look like from different software.
I think even something that this super kind of pull our temperature data out, and send it on. With older or different versions of how that file is originally processed is that like now you see ambient 3C, but there have been other categories in different.
Yeah, because this is, I think, a VDAT format. As opposed to like a VRL. I mean, it is VRL, but this is, I think, moving toward the VDAT headers and such to make them justified on that end.
I'll show you some stuff. So there's something with back and forth with for quite a while because we were trying to figure out what company to pass along. And it's because we have files that were downloaded. But we processed enough to do that. We would know that we're actually pulling.
Mhm.
Yeah, so. Anyways, I'll send some clips so you can see it. It might be in the past.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if you have things like this, and I think that's something that I consider is physically adding that metadata field. Maybe this is what is processed on, possibly rather than keeping it in a file tree, which is a pretty gross way to do it. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you have any random files you want to put out there, please do. Hey, yeah, what's up? Yeah.
Simple metadata that things like I don't think it's I was really by not having how to show what that was like. Just to break that. Basically,
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, for those on, just a plug for getting out and trying to play with Fathom Central to try to poke and prod and get metadata on there, see what's coming out of it, and see what the strengths and weaknesses are, and pass the weaknesses on to you so they can no longer be weaknesses, right? Yeah, awesome. Matt.
figured out the second half of the question better than you think. I mentioned that we're raising rates, but they're all, not this website.
Yep.
Which this is running. So I guess, well, so I'll just put that out. Yeah, if we're successful in getting the funding, we should, receiving funding should be, should we be thinking about funding, I guess there are two paths that I should say. One would be funding to help support you to update this code or like new code that maybe whatever the new website is, or be willing to spend some time sort of thinking through how we structure that update so that the key pieces that we need for this can still be incorporated into an updated list. But I kind of want to put that out there. We don't have to let it do it.
Yeah, sure. So the question is, the desire, I think any desire at some point is for the website and the portal, et cetera, to be updated. What would that kind of entail to possibly update this package? I mean, this is done kind of ad hoc, and I'm more than happy to update it as needs be. I think right now, like 3 people and a very educated dog use it, so it might not be the most pressing issue to worry about this little package when going that way. But I think that it is helpful should people get in there, and yeah, I'd be more than happy to kind of step in and interact on that way. The caveat being that I think that there are push-pull from a lot of different aspects of what needs to be done. Database structure, I'm not a database structure person. I would break something in a terrible way. And it's part of the reason that OTN are here and help set us up, is I think that's kind of first and foremost, making sure that works. And I think second is making sure that the barrier to entry for anybody new coming in, so making sure that just the website is nice and pretty and goes from there. And I think that people like me who are already invested, and I think that anybody picks this up are probably already invested if they're interested in trying to do things in a programmatic way. I think unfortunately, or for better or for worse, and I think rightly, we're probably a distant 3rd or 4th in that. But yeah, I mean, I would love to.
That's been really helpful. I'm thinking about that. And just as another kind of blind spot into what might be able to go into design. If we figure on the old website, build something new. What are the how can we build some of this into that's like that's stuff that you want to do?
I think the right. I think right now, and I don't know if it's so please, someone who's more familiar with database and stuff, I don't know if it's kind of like a good standard or kind of a drop in the conscious bucket, but kind of they call it RESTful APIs in terms of interacting with database, which is REST stands for it's like representative state type or something like that, where if you ever, I'm not sure if anybody has worked with GIS data, and you go through like the Arc REST API, and it's kind of like black and white, a little bit scary, but then you click a button and this URL fills out and downloads something, and you can interact with that way. So it's the idea is that you can build out URLs with different terms to get what you want and interact with the server. I think API, the Geo server allows this. I mean, the way that I'm able to interact with the Geo server is physically building a URL, and it's well documented and it's clear and it's fast and it's awesome. So moving towards something that would allow for some sort of RESTful API in terms of this database, which I think does allow security in there, right? Because I can't ping prohibited tables from the Geo server in that way. So I think that is something that can be built in my humble opinion. I think allowing for some sort of structure like that would be brilliant.